The situation in Poland, if we could skip to the next slide, please, is pretty intense at this moment. We have more than 3.4 million people that arrived to Poland. And according to UNHCR expectations, we can have 2.6 million people in Poland still in December, so by the end of this year. So we are looking at long-term solutions as well as mid-term and temporary solutions, trying to figure out the best way to support everyone according to their needs, having in mind also the general housing situation in Poland. But to start with our response in Habitat, what we did after first days of the war, we were contacted by the local authorities here in Warsaw that asked us to partner with them and support them with supporting people who were coming to
Katarzyna, I think you may have accidentally gone on mute.
Somebody muted us, yeah. Yeah, sorry, we were muted. So where should I start again?
You mentioned that the city of Warsaw had got in touch with you soon after the crisis happened.
Yeah. So they have called us saying that they are establishing this model of matching host families from Poland, from Warsaw, with people coming to Warsaw, and they wanted our support with the matching process. So they asked us to establish a reception point at the Warsaw East train station. And within that point that we established over a week, we started answering to the people who were coming to our point. They were arriving to Warsaw by train. They were really tired after the long journeys, and then we were finding them a matching flat room offered by the people from Warsaw and supporting them with some groceries and accompanying to the flat, checking again the flat. It was previously vetted by the city of Warsaw, but we were once again checking that the flat is okay and it's accurate for the family, and that we were leaving the family in that flat so they could finally rest after such a long journey. And the really what warmed my heart with that when we were establishing the point is that we already had some people from Ukraine living in Poland before the war escalated. So we offered the jobs in the point to, for example, to people coming from Ukraine or to people who were already in Poland, and for example to a great lady that was previously our client within our social rental program, and she already lived in Poland for a few years. We were able to support her before that, so at that point she wanted to support us and to provide help to more people coming to Poland. So it was an amazing thing that so many great people decided to support people at the Warsaw East train station. We are still running that point, but after time it turned out that the host families offers usually or on sometimes it's not enough, because for example the families were traveling in a bigger groups and they didn't want to split. So we started also booking rooms for them in the hostels or smaller hotels here in Warsaw to provide them the support and temporary shelter that they needed. We also used our restore that we have operating in Warsaw to become more of logistical center to provide people with in-kind donations such as washing machines or fridges or bedding. That is really the most wanted thing right now in Poland. And so our store started supplementing both the flats that we were renting, but also other organizations and reception points that were in need of any housing items that we could provide to them. But of course, answering to the immediate accommodation need is not enough. And from the very beginning, we were thinking about next steps. What will happen with those families in a month? What will happen with them in 6 months? and we are still developing that program, but of course we were building on what we already tested in Poland. So we started expanding our social rental program. Under the social rental program since 2017, we were renting flats mostly on the private market, but also a few flats from the city of Warsaw, and sub-renting those to people in housing need. And right now we have many more people in housing need in Warsaw, so we are renting more apartments. We are able to offer to those who need it financial support to pay the rents for the flats. But what we really want to do is to provide integrated support to the people from Ukraine in the flats. So we are partnering with another organization who specializes in social and integration support, and they are supporting the families to be able to stand on their feet and start their lives or their time here in Warsaw. So under this program, we already rented many new apartments and are still employing more people to be able to answer to the needs on a bigger scale. But also the social rental agency, the social rental project that we started in 2017 served us for last years for our advocacy. So we were able to convince decision makers in Poland to establish law that would regulate social rental agencies, and it is in force since last year. So right now we really see the big potential of this new solution, and before our meeting I was at the Polish Parliament speaking about the possibility of scaling up of the social rental agency model within all or majority of the municipalities in Poland, because this is really the midterm solution that is so much needed right now. People could use the support of the intermediary of the social rental agency who rents flats and sub-rents those to the people coming from Ukraine, but also to people from Poland, to support everyone who is in the same difficult housing situation. And municipalities can establish those social rental agencies, but at this time they need more of financial support and organizational support to be able to do that. So we Habitat are in the process of drafting a sort of a guidebook for municipalities. The biggest law firm in Poland is helping us thanks to support of one of our partners who connected us. And we are also discussing this with the ministry responsible for housing to be able to promote and scale up the results of or to promote this guidebook within municipalities so they could use it and really start their own social rental agencies on a timely basis. And last but not least, as a next step, we are also foreseeing and preparing to do that refurbishments of empty spaces. We've been running empty spaces project focusing on renovations of empty vacant premises for housing purposes for more than a year now. And we really see that this is one of the best solutions. Also, a lot of experts in the parliament talked about this unused housing stock that we have in Poland, and now is the perfect time to use it. So using also our expertise of the housing market in Poland, we are present here for 30 years this year. We have our anniversary. We were asked by UNHCR to support them with co-leading with the shelter coordination group that is bringing together INGOs, local NGOs, actors and stakeholders relevant for the response in the field of shelter. And we are very gladly supporting this group and trying to come up with solutions that will be supporting long and mid-term housing solutions in Poland. If we could skip to the next slide. I would like to share with you one story that really warms my heart. This is Marina and her daughters, Christina and Alisa. They came from Dniepro to Poland, and well, when they heard bombs and they were so scared. Dniepro is in the central part of Ukraine, so they were really surprised and scared, and Marina's husband asked them to leave Ukraine. They were offered a bus transport from the company that Marina worked for, and they came to Warsaw, and we were able to find a flat for them. They can live there for a few months at least, but of course we will try to prolong it or find them a new flat if they decide to stay in Poland. And after a few days, they really felt secure and peaceful, and without the alarms and the bombs flowing in, they really feel the difference, and the girls are really settling in very well. They brought here their favorite stuffed animal toys. You can see those on the photo, and they were like really holding very tightly to those animals for the first weeks here in Poland. Right now they are settling in and hoping for better future. So if we could move to the next slide. Yeah, we couldn't done anything we are doing without our volunteers, our donors, our partners, and everyone who is supporting us. So many thanks for that. And here you can see some wooden things for tea lights that our volunteers did in our restore. And we will offer those to some families that we are supporting with our social rental program, so they can have more welcoming and nicer flats here in Warsaw. So thank you very much. Over to our next speakers.
Thank you, Katarzyna. So grateful for that presentation. As you can see, Poland is probably one of the biggest countries in terms of influx of refugees. So what Katarzyna explained in her presentation, which I think is key, is all the partnerships that they have been building and will continue to build now. As we're recognizing we cannot do this alone. If you look at the number of volunteers that are expected to still stay in Poland by the end of the year, it was like 2.6 million. I believe Poland is about 38 million in total. So that's in about 2 months, 3 months period, they've grown by 7%, and there just isn't the housing stock available. So a lot of what Katarzyna and the team in Poland have been doing is trying to create more housing stock as fast as possible, and we acknowledge we cannot do that on our own. So the next, and this is the last speaker, I would like to introduce, next slide please, Tatiana, is Anna Konopczyk, and she's our Poland Response Director that's very kindly come in away from her day job to help support, because as you can imagine, Poland is still responding to its normal housing needs of the Polish population, as is the case with Roberto and Zsolt's teams. So this added additional work is on top of what they normally do. So thank you to the Habitat team that are on today as well. So Anna has come in particularly because Poland has got such a huge number, and is looking at how do we best position ourselves to help the most families. And that, as I mentioned, needs us cooperating with the government sector, which is happening, the private sector, developers, etc., and other peer organizations like UNHCR. So Anna will now share our strategy for the long term, particularly in Poland, but it will cut across the other countries as well. So Anna, over to you. And Anna, by the way, has been with Habitat for the has been with us for 6 years, but her first posting was Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. Then she took a break and then she came back. So we're grateful she did. So Anna, over to you, please.
Thank you, and you nailed the last name. Well done. And as Heather mentioned, the largest refugee population entering into neighboring countries is Poland. However, the number of new refugees entering into neighboring countries is actually down quite a bit, and we're seeing more kind of pendulum movements across back and forth the border between Ukraine and Poland and others. And so the overall response has shifted into kind of medium to longer term issues. And so both according to discussions with refugees as well as by major actors like the UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees, the number one need at the moment is this medium to longer term housing. So most of the families have who are on the move have reached a place where they're going to settle, at least for the medium to long term. And this is particularly where Habitat for Humanity's value added is in the sector. It's because it's getting more complicated. It's starting to include long-term actors like the government and the private sector. It has to be in local structures, and also it has to be something that relates to long-term housing solutions, or the sustainable housing solutions. And as basically the only housing NGO in the region, Habitat for Humanity has been seen as a thought leader in this within the humanitarian sector, but also, and the team has kind of risen to the challenge, which I really appreciate, engaging both kind of international actors that are coming in, as well as their government counterparts and private sector counterparts to try and create what this medium to long-term solution could be. And so it starts with trying to make sure we demonstrate real solutions that can actually have impact. And so that's why potentially some of the numbers, we start kind of small, wanting to make sure that what we're advocating and building on for larger term successes actually has a proven impact. And so some of that we're building off of pre-crisis programming. So in particular, the empty spaces program. So having built off of research, identifying where some of the most underutilized buildings are that we can easily convert into new housing stock, as well as the social rental program or social rental agency. Both of those have been kind of proven pre-crisis, and we've since adapted it for the refugee response, and starting to show that this is a solution that really works. Similar with the restore, starting to kind of convert our pre-crisis work. However, we're also seeking to demonstrate new types of programming that is specific to this. It's because of the scale of the need, we're compelled to come up with new innovative solutions, and that's particularly where Habitat has played a unique role in trying to bring together different stakeholders like the private sector. They have strong relationships with the Polish Developers Association and others, as well as the government, to start to look at how could we maybe help the private sector to enter into the affordable housing space. In many other countries, the private sector plays a large role, whereas in Poland, it's still very nascent. And so we're looking through in-depth conversations, both with the private sector and the government, to try and find possibilities for piloting some of these options that we can then build up. Where we are now, which you've heard the teams talk about a bit, is closer to this advocate stage, where we have people like Kasia, who are meeting with the government. She was invited to the Union of City Governments Roundtable a few weeks ago. She was just with the Parliament. She's invited as a thought leader and expert on housing, particularly because the social rental program is seen by think tanks and the government as the main medium to long-term housing solution for refugees. It's the way to bring a most accessible part of the housing market, rental stock, to the social sector. However, in addition to that, we're working with this shelter coordination group that Kasia mentioned, which is a coordination group that we're managing with the UN High Commission for Refugees, to try and make sure we're getting all of the humanitarian actors on board with that. And so the Habitat also is unique in the sense that we've been the only ones able to bring in the private sector and government into those coordination meetings, compared to the other sectors, like protection or other coordination groups. So again, just demonstrating kind of Habitat's unique point. But the idea for all of this is that we're trying to scale and have in mind that 2 million refugees that are estimated to stay in Poland by the end of the year, because we need those solutions to be ones that can be brought to scale. So that's why we've already had 5 city governments reach out to us, asking about how might they develop a social rental program in their cities. And so the idea is, while we demonstrate and kind of teach about what the social rental program can be and how you can create a social rental agency quickly, every city should be able to create one and tap into funding from the EU or their national governments in order to bring that to a national scale in every city. It won't require us to be present nationally in every city. And similarly for the private sector engagement, we're looking at kind of one model that can be something that can build off of the strengths of cities, some of their lands, but also the strengths of the private sector and their construction capacity and programming, and then as well as what the social sector can bring. So we're trying to see if we can scale that up create a model that can be scaled up per city. So we're starting with Warsaw, but the idea being something that can be scaled up. The last thing I kind of mention is this stage of scaling is probably where the biggest long-term or the biggest need is in terms of funding and programming. While we had that big spike of refugees coming in early in to the crisis, a lot of that was supported through solidarity housing, so host families willing to host, or through kind of free hotel accommodation. We're now to the point where that's going to have to be paid for by rent or by new construction or refurbishing, and that's really costly, and that is going to be the scale of millions. And hence why we're looking at how do we tap into private and public funding for that. So it's not just private donations, but that is something that just to kind of keep in mind that where we'll need a lot of support moving forward as well.